Hello, and welcome back to Season 1, Episode 2 of Let's Talk Human Rights, the Vodcast. I am your host, Masichaba Masamola Wamdaka, and I'm very happy to have you back with me again. Our episode today is titled Youth Uprisings Shaping Democratic Discourse and Awareness of Human Rights Across Africa. Now, the phenomenon of Africa having a youth bulge is very well known, yet young people remain largely excluded from leadership and decision-making roles. Despite their numbers, youth are often marginalized from formal political processes. This exclusion, combined with economic hardship, inequality, and repression, has led to widespread frustration and a wave of youth-led protests across the continent. Since the Arab Spring of 2010 spilling over into 2011, starting in Tunisia followed by Egypt, movements in Sudan, Senegal, Burkina Faso, Kenya, Mozambique, and more recently in Togo have seen young people take to the streets demanding democracy, accountability, and protection of human rights. Social media has played a key role in mobilizing these movements. But while protests may lead to regime change, or in some cases, long-term reform and real inclusion are often lacking. In countries like Mozambique and Togo, the situation is more severe. Youth disillusionment is fueling recruitment into extremist groups. In Europe, too, young people are increasingly supporting far-right ideologies as seen in parts of Germany today. Across the world, youth voices are being tested in the fight to defend liberal democratic values. Now, to help me unpack these matters, I'm very pleased to be joined by my three guests who will help me navigate this topic from their personal encounters and direct frontline experience. Asha Bashir, a Kenyan national, is a distinguished legal professional with a multifaceted career, holding various key roles within the legal landscape. As an accomplished advocate, commissioner of oaths, certified mediator, and legal drafter, she has made significant contributions to the field of law. Asha also serves as a commissioner of the People's Restorative Justice Commission, a people-led initiative championing community-centered and restorative approaches to justice. Beyond her professional endeavors, Asha volunteers her time and resources to various community legal aid clinics, providing much legal aid assistance to marginalized individuals and local communities. Unkusante Etienne Kounde is a Togolese national and a civil lawyer by profession. He currently works for Dynamic Law Consulting, a legal consultancy and legal representation firm dealing with numerous civil law issues such as labor law, land and property law, as well as corporate law. He is a victim of human rights violations from the Togolese protests and since then has become a human rights activist. He has graduated a bachelor's degree in private law. David Fardo is a Mozambican national. He holds a degree in aquaculture engineering, a master's in business administration, and is currently pursuing a bachelor's degree in political science. He is a social and human rights activist, president of the Youth Parliament of Mozambique, founder and former general coordinator of PALOP, Youth Coalition for Youth Rights and Priorities, and a permanent member of the Fourth General Assembly of the Economic, Social, Cultural Council of the African Union, ECOSOC, and other African youth movements. He is also the member of the G18M, the March 18 Generation Movement, which has been active in the fight for democratic reforms. David, Asha, and Etienne, thank you so much for joining me today to talk to this very important and pressing issue, which we find our youth across the continent speaking to today. I have David and Asha with me here in studio, and Etienne is joining us online. Etienne, I would like to start with you. What has been the biggest loss to the youth of Togo in this time of protest, which has been met by the harsh response by government?
Thank you very much, Shaba. Thank you to you all. Thank you first for the opportunity given to us to express ourselves on this crucial topic that is youth and human rights in Africa right now. one of the main loss of the youth and more generally of the people of Togo after the events that took care from the 6th June of this year is to face the disillusion and to face the reality that until now was just an impression. The reality is that the government, the leaders of our country, unfortunately, do not put human being at the center of political and social policies. That's regrettable, and that is the main constatation we can do. One of the main disillusion of the youth and in general of people of Togo is to face the reality of the lack of putting human beings at the middle of uh, public policies. And apart from that, we can we had the opportunity to to see that the government and the leaders are able of every everything for repression, to reprime manifestation, and that we have not the duty, we have not the rights of manifestation in our country. That is regrettable.
Etienne, as you speak about these challenges, as a lawyer yourself, what have you observed since the start of the protests and the demonstrations? And why was it so important to hold your government to account?
As I was saying, there are two things, two main lacking in governance in our country. First of all, we are not at the center of policies. That is a constatation, a clear constatation. And apart from that, at the legal point, there is something that occurred last year in our country, a modification or a changement of the political regime has been done. We went from a presidential regime to a parliamentary regime, and that was not has not been done with the avail the the agreement of people of Togo. The parliament reunited itself with some deputies in the term of their mandate, and they changed the constitution. That is the first source of of
The challenges, the first challenge, the first thing that came up.
exactly.
David, as we think about what Etienne has just said, and we think about the post-electoral violence in Mozambique subsequent to the October 2024 ballot, these protests went beyond just the outcome of the election. I mean, just mirroring what Etienne is speaking about, the social policies and the things which haven't been introduced to actually alleviate people's suffering. Now, given the post-electoral unrest in Mozambique and the challenges facing the youth in marginalized areas, how widespread is the recruitment of young people in violent extremist groups such as in Cabo Delgado?
I think allow me to say that in Mozambique we're facing a lot of challenges as young people, as a youth, and even the situation in Cabo Delgado is becoming since 2017. I think that since 2017 when the terrorism started there, and as activists we start also asking the government to have more information about what's happening on the ground. We had so many activists and journalists who tried also to share with us the information, but some of them been killed, some of them be arrested by the government or by the system, and until now we don't even know where those people are. But looking, for example, to the last election, 2024, first allow me to say that we had the local elections in 2023, where also the protest started. But before the election in October in 2023, we had a protest in 2023 in March, where the generation 18 of March born. when one of the activists and human rights defenders and musician called Azagaya, he died. And we decided also to organize like a manifestation just to also just to also show that we loved him and we recognize what he have been doing when he was alive. And during that protest, we had some young people who have been killed, some of them arrested, and we had one of them called Inocencio Manyiki and Marcus Miguny, which the police also shooted on them and lost one of the eye. And what we're doing in 2023 also, we had protests, but last year, I think that was like the epicenter of the protests, because the youth went to the street just to protest against the result, because first those results took more than 30 days to be released by the Constitutional Council, and the youth went to the street just to protest. But a part of the young people as activists, we noticed that one of the personalities was, or the front line was Venancio Mulani. It was one of the presidential candidates. But a part of contesting the results, the young people, they took place through that manifestation specifically to also protest against the high cost of life, against the lack of opportunities. And the situation in Cabo Delgado, what we've seen is the young people there are also challenging with lack of opportunities. When I'm saying lack of opportunities, I mean education, health, and employment, habitation, and so on, all the human rights. And even the situation of the terrorism, when it started in 2017, we note that some of the young people who joined the terrorism, they were from Nampula province and Cabo Delgado, and they've been recruited by the terrorists. And we saw also, because of the lack of opportunities, there's a gap which those people can also be being recruited because sometimes they offer like a big amount of money, like come to join us and then you can earn this and that amount. That's why even now we don't even know who is at the front line. Some people saying that because it's the Islamic Islamic jihadists, and we don't even know if it's true or not. But sometimes, the other hand, we're facing some challenge to get or to receive information about what's happening exactly in the ground. Last 2 weeks, for example, those terrorists went to a district called Shiuri, and we have more than 12,000 people who are trying to find a safe place right now. So they're also challenging.
Are these internally displaced people?
Pardon?
Are they internally
displaced
people?
They're internally displaced people because they are moving from Cabo Delgado to Nampula, because Cabo Delgado is making a border with Nampula province, like just to find a safe place. But as you know, it's just come since 2017. We have more than 17 to 2025, more than 7 years. I think it's almost 8 years. So we don't even know when this situation would be ended, but we're praying and also we're pressing the government just to find some solution. But at the end of the day, we know that we have more young people there as the soldiers, and I would like also to take this opportunity to recognize those young people who are at the front line to fight against the terrorism, because we know that it's not easy. Some of them were killed. We received some pictures by WhatsApp, and I think that the sad side of that situation is because as we are living in Cabo Delgado, for example, you don't even know what's happening in, for example, in Macomia, in Palma, and several times we receive information from Al Jazeera, from DW, like from international media channels. So, but the local or the national television or the national media's companies, they're not sharing what's happening in Cabo Delgado. So this is one of the saddest sides. And currently, we have the new government. the government also, we tried also to press them, like the situation in Cabo Delgado is still ongoing. We have more people displaced. We have more people being killed every single day. We have people also who are challenging to find a place to live, food, something to eat. So the people from Cabo Delgado now, they're not worrying about, for example, what is democracy, or to fight about politics.
Survival.
It's about getting way to survive every single day. So we are also trying, we had some movements as activists with different platforms and organizations also as well, where we try to have a fundraising programs to help those people in Nampula, Cabo Delgado, and now as the Youth Parliament of Mozambique, which is national CSO, we have provincial coordinators who are also trying to lead some campaigns to help those people.
So in other words, and I'd actually like you to please speak about the Youth Parliament in Mozambique and exactly what kind of entity it is. Its effectiveness goes beyond just organizing protests. You're actually a support network for young people.
Yes, the Youth Parliament of Mozambique is a national CSO. We use also to make sure that it's a civil society organization, which also it's like a side organization where the young people can meet, can discuss about their own challenge, and also try to find some solution. And that solution, at the end of the day, we share with the government, we share with main stakeholders to see what can be done also for the youth. And we have three different pillars. The first one is about democracy and government. The second is about economic and development. The third and last is about gender, education, gender, environment, and social issues, social affairs. So through these three pillars, we organize a lot of meetings, debates, trainings, and we have also, during several times, we share some press release about what's happening in Mozambique with the decision making with the decision makers. And we are trying also to have some auscultations. For example, if we realize that at the parliament, at the main national parliament, there's a law which has been has been revised, we also organize a side event to discuss about that particular law, to see what the youth also can add. At the end of the day, we share it with the MPs, we share this with the national parliament, just to influence on the public policies. But we realized, for example, this year in March, the new government discussed about the quinquennial, I don't know if this is the correct word, like the plan for the next 5 years. We call it Plan Quinquenal, PKG 2025-2029, and also the economic and social plan, where the government used this as,
a platform.
Which they can also make sure that the human rights, everything, it's on control. So we also
Can I interrupt you there, David? Is it inclusive? And does it include the youth, this consultative process on the platform?
Yes, it's inclusive, and we take it through the digital platforms as well, but physically, because we know that we have lack of funds to organize all those auscultation or consultation, on all the 11 provinces of Mozambique. So we do this using the digital platforms as well, and the young people, so they attend. They shared some information, and we used to inquire them just to share with us what they think about a given, 10 policies. At the end of the day, we share with the government, with the MPs, just to influence. But, sometimes as human rights defenders, we're facing some challenges at the end of the day. And those challenges is not just about lack of opportunity and so on, because we as activists, I think that the system of the regime, at the end of the day, they see us as enemies, because we're trying to aware the young people. We're trying to open the mind of the youth, about what is their rights at the end of the day, because we are not doing any side actions a part of the government. We are going through the constitution, we're going through the African Youth Chapter, we're going through also the Agenda 2063, all those documents, all those
are guiding principles for you.
Yes, principles for us. us. And so we're trying to use this document to aware the young people. At the end of the day, they will be also at the front line to advocate for their own rights.
Yeah. Speaking about frontlining and being at the front lines of advocating for justice, I'd like us to quickly watch a video from the Gen Z protests, which started in 2024 and have just celebrated an anniversary this year. But of course, the youth are still in the streets fighting for youth rights. Please, let's take a look at that.
The protests have become increasingly violent over the past year. In the latest unrest, demonstrators and police clashed, leaving many dead and injured. The group says being organized means they can help people who've been injured or offer legal support to those who've been arrested. An outward display of the organization is this uniform. For them, it's not only a sign of their resistance, but also a commitment to the Constitution of Kenya, which they say has been violated by the political class. Joshua Okayo says getting organized is part of a long-term plan.
We could have achieved so much had we been intentional about organizing and just strategizing and being able to foretell what the state might do in case of anything. Protest can be done even without leadership, without structure, without anything. But we are organizing to actually overhaul the system. And you cannot overhaul the system and leave a blank space. You don't leave a hollow space. You have to actually occupy those positions.
Being decentralized has allowed the Gen Z protesters to challenge Kenya's political establishment. Not everyone in this leaderless movement is happy with the emergence of people stepping up to lead them, but members of the RGM say that organization is the only way forward.
Now, youth demonstrations, like we've heard from Etienne and David, have not allowed young people to directly influence post-protest governments. The recent Gen Z protests have become a model of how young people can hold governments accountable. Asha, as we've also seen from the video, why is it then that African governments are not making a youth desk or ministry as a priority at this stage of our democracy? Some of it, one could argue, is a bit of window dressing.
So the reason why we are facing the challenges we are facing across Africa, the video you just shared is a Kenyan context of the 2024 Gen Z protests, which has spilled over to last year and as we speak. So the governments in Africa have this ideology that youth is just a demographic aspect. And not,
one that can only be roped in
yes,
during elections.
And not a part of the building of a nation. And therefore what happens is, for them, it is just the numbers. We have youth in this country, X amount X, but it's not about what can this youth offer. They think it's a postponed affair, meaning governments in Africa tend to think youth will have time at their time. And so they do not bring the youth on the table to build the future. Yet they forget choices now have a bearing on the future. So when you look at African context, UNDP in 2023 released a survey where we have 60% under 25, under the age of 25. You're not even now talking about 35. That shows you the numbers we have in Africa as youth. So ministries, a good example like in Kenya, what has been happening is the ministries have been amalgamated in other ministries, sort of diluted and put at the back seat, because the leaders in Africa tend to think the best way these leaders will have their time. This time is ours. So the old guard want to hold on to power, to think that these youth do not have experience. These youth do not know what they want. They still have time. They will do it later. So what has happened is the ministries now and the successive governments that come in place take it as you're just there. The second challenge we are facing is, even if you put pressure through protests and say we want a youth, or even the civil society groups and organization, and the youth rally around themselves and say we're going to set up this structure, what happens, it's a toothless dog, because you do not have the budget, you do not have the legislative muscle, you cannot influence policies, so it's just there like a flower. So what that does is leaders look at it in African context. You have the numbers, we see you, but you will wait another 10, 15 years. So just wait. So it's ticking the boxes. There's a demographic angle, just like the way they say they're women, they're persons living with disability. Youth is also classified like that. And so what that has done is, over the years, it has created agitation. because, like I said, 60%. If you look at interparliamentary caucuses, we are less than 2% of youth in parliament in Africa. So when you look at that,
if you think
staggering.
about it.
Yeah. So if you look at that, it shows there are people who are deliberately not seeing the youth as part and parcel of building a future for the continent, leave alone their specific countries, but are seeing the youth as a threat. And they're not maximizing on what the youth can offer in terms of innovation. Because if you ask me, the generation my parents grew in were not as tech savvy as this generation is. So there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of potential in the youth. But the problem is you're postponed, you're told the future, you're still young, you have time. And what that does is you suppress the country, because these youth are the people to offer innovation, they are to give ideas, they are the people to sit on the table, but at the end of it all, you expect 10 years down the line, they carry the consequences of your mistakes at the time the regime is running. So we are facing that issue, and it is across the globe, because leadership is seen for a particular age set, and it's seen that the young do not know what they're doing, so give them time to grow. So my take is the ministries and the successive governments in Africa and the current governments in all the countries in Africa must step up and ensure that we have ministries not as a picture or a trophy placed somewhere, but with allocation in terms of budgetary allocation, that they can be able to implement and foresee the running of the country. They should be part of the table when decisions are being made and not just mere on paper. So the Ministry of Youth in different countries should be seen as a bridge, not a badge, because those are two different things.
Absolutely. Still staying with you, Asha, I mean, you've said a mouthful. Even from the video that we've just watched, with the rise of extrajudicial killings and arbitrary arrests, even enforced disappearances, censorship against activists and protesters, can you describe some of the legal cases that you have handled to defend young people and their rights to protest, and what have been those judicial outcomes?
So I can particularly talk about Kenyan context. The Gen Z protest started last year at the culmination of what was a build-up of all institutions failing, meaning the young people tried to petition, do public participation, it was not working. So what the regime did, and which most regimes in Africa do, is to try and gag or scare so that it looks like a deterrent measure. So like our case, they picked these young people and brought them to court. They were arrested, arraigned, slept in custody, then arraigned in court, but the charges were flimsy. It was a politically castigated thing. One of the charges, you could see it is illegal assembly. Yet our Constitution, Article 37, guarantees the freedom to assemble and picket. You could see others were brought in court, no charges. I remember of a case we had an activist arrested, the charge sheet is not brought, and then after a few hours, they release. So you've spent in custody. Remember, it does not solve the trauma. Absolutely. And it does not solve the issue of accountability as a government. So what you're doing, you're not solving a problem, you're actually creating adding more. And you're more of a reactionary government than more of issue-based. So, and what African countries do is more reactionary. They do not tame things at the initial stage. Like for our case, the young people started the protests, they did petition, they went for public participation and said, we do not want the finance bill because we feel it is too much as a country. And they raised their issues. All that was ignored. So the last resort was to go on the street. So one of the charges, like I said, is that. Another one, because our revolution started more on the social media. So now they were going for the Cybercrime Act by saying, oh, you're posting things that are not true, false information to incite the public. Again, you go to court. So they actually
created laws to impinge on
They actually used the Cybercrime Act, which is there, but to twist it. Because when you say it's false information you're posting, it is up to you to confirm. And most of those cases were dropped because of lack of evidence. Recently, this year, it went worse because now they went for terrorism. So you can imagine now we keep growing. Of treason. Yeah. So we keep growing. As we speak, the cases are active in court on terror-related charges, arson. But when you look at it clearly, there is no evidence in most of these cases. So those ones that are ongoing, I cannot talk much about it because it's before a court of law. But the ones that were actually withdrawn, it was because of lack of evidence, and there was nothing to it. So it was used as a way to scare away the young people, that if you dare try to talk about the issues ailing this African continent, and particularly Kenya, we will arrest you, we will intimidate you. We've also seen police brutality,
which is a major
up front.
factor.
Yes. So you find a police officer just removing the gun and shooting. And then we have a head of state the next day waking up and saying, yes, I support the police, shoot the leg. And you see, shooting a leg, you can equally die, because like our first person who died, the young man who died, Rex Masai, he died because of a gunshot on the leg. So that has now brought the issue, do we as African countries respect the law? I might not like what is happening as a president, for example, in my country, but am I a reactionary leader, or do I follow the law in as much as it bites? Because the law should bite everyone to make sure we accommodate each other.
And that it is fair.
And that it is fair. So that itself has now created an elephant in the room, because leaders do not want to take responsibility and do not want to be questioned. And the minute you go there when you're not transparent, it means democracy is shrinking. So you're forcing people to do what you feel is right without listening to dissenting voices. So any dissenting voice is actually maimed. And that now has brought where we are as an African continent, that now the young people are saying, no, enough is enough. We are not our parents. We will not sit and allow us to pay. Just like our parents now were quiet, we are paying the consequences economically, socially, in all quarters. So we will not pass that to our children. So the journey starts somewhere.
Would you like to add something to that?
I would like to add, for example, for this particular situation of Kenya, in Mozambique, I think that we're facing the same challenges. Our justice is not functional. Secondly, I think that I have some doubts about our democracy. For example, looking for our constitution, it predicts at the Article 51, the right of protest, or the right of manifestation, demonstration. But what it seems like, when we try to go to the street, we submit like all the documents, we follow all the bureaucracy. By the end of the day, if we mark we schedule a protest for example, Saturday in the morning, you realize that's the point. When you go there, the police will already been there with guns, with dogs, and so on. And last year, for example, during the post-electoral moment, we had more than 400 young people who've been killed by the police. And we asked, even though for the justice, and likely we've been working with the Lawyer Association Bar, which helped a lot of young people, more than 2,000 young people being arrested, and half of them been also released. And even now, we're still having some people
still in custody.
They're still in custody. So we're worrying about this, because at the end of the day, we are trying to follow and respect the law, respect the constitution, but the same government who is supposed to be to lead by example is the same who's also they're acting out of the law. So I think that even the protests, we start with pacific protest or demonstrations, but at the end of the day, when the police start shooting, the police starting killing and arrested some young people or activists, in our hands, some of them they use also to block the roads, to loot some shops, to destroy some infrastructure, and even now we're still asking for justice for all those 400 young people who have been killed, and some of them have been arrested. So I think that in Africa, one of the biggest problem is about our elders and our liberation political parties, because it seems like as they fought for our political independence,
we have a political debt.
We have political debt for them, and they can stand on power for even more than 50 or even 100 years. So, but we know that the political environments, it's also changing across. We're also following what's happening in the continent. We need also to make the young people including and also participating on the national and continental debates.
And as you speak about that, David, I'm actually thinking about migration patterns, for example, of young people, enduring the hardship and sometimes the tragic end in terms of escaping their realities in their country. Increasingly, there's also anti-immigration sentiments coming from Europe, a lot of right-wing populism being a factor. You talk about being aware and observant of what is going on the continent, especially around young people, do you think there's an opportunity for a youth avant-garde to hold governments to account for the atrocities against their citizens? I'm thinking very specifically here about the European Union, where it is concerned. Something around solidarity and outreach to conscientize and sensitize youth in Europe against right-wing policies and anti-democratic nature and rhetoric, because the disillusionment of youth in Europe is also happening. Yeah.
I think that we're still having, we call it Occidental campaign to show to the young African young people that the Europe is the best. But we've been talking early in the morning that in Africa we have so many resources, but it's just because of our leadership. I don't know if am I able to say what to call them as leaders, because the way that they behave, it seems like they are dictatorial system, you know. But even recently, I was talking during my speech yesterday in one summit in Mozambique, saying that the current situation of the young people who are facing some challenge with unemployment, for example, I think that it's one of the main reasons that make the young people to cross the borders or even the Mediterranean Sea to the Europe just to find good ways or opportunities. Because asking for the young people, even for those people who are watching now, if you are living nearby a border with a country which probably has good conditions, and knowing that in your house you don't even have salt, bread, rice, what can you do? The only way is trying to escape, cross the border to other side, even illegally, to find some solutions. And nowadays, we feel that, sadly, we have some Africans or Mozambicans, Kenyans, who are living, for example, in South Africa, through the Dudula operation is just one of the example. Some of them are being chased to go back to their own countries. But I'm not blaming the South African young people, but I would like to say that, firstly, we need also to be patriotic, knowing that we are a continent, we are fighting for a united Africa. But on the other hand, I would like to blame the government, for example, the Mozambican government, who are not create conditions for the young people to stay in their own countries. At the end of the day, the same young people from Mozambique, they are crossing the border to South Africa, is just an example, to become builders, to build house. But they can do the same job in Mozambique. But the same governments, they are not giving them opportunities. I'm saying the same, for example, for Europe. Some of the Africans, they are crossing the Mediterranean Sea to Europe just to find good jobs there. But we're still saying that Africa is one of the youngest continents of the world. Africa has a lot of resource which can, at the end of the day, maybe benefit the same young people. But now we're not feeling that. We used to say that even Mozambique, they discovered gas at the north region of Mozambique. We have so many resources. We have diamond in Botswana. We have, for example, petroleum in Congo, Angola, and so on. But the main answer is the young people or is the communities being benefited with that? I think that's the answer is no. So even the African Union, I think that we need also to press the African Union about that. As young people would like to feel what is the main role of the African Union. I'm one of the members of the 4th General Assembly of the Economic, Social and Cultural Council, and we use also through some clusters to share all this situation, and would like to feel from the African Union, currently led by Angola, and to to feel and to see some practical results at the end of the day, which will benefit the young people. Yeah.
Etienne, I'd like to bring you. Sorry, you wanted to say something,
in
Asha.
a sentence, what he said. The issue of my immigration and the youth, because for me it's pertinent. Like in our country, I think the head of state decided, like I said, African heads of state are more reactionary after a mess has happened. So to counter this is to say, oh, these youth are protesting because they're unemployed. So here I am, I'm getting you jobs outside the country. But the key question is, there are a lot of jobs locally within the country. It's just that systems are not in place. And for them, they look at postponing the problem so that the issue is not about making Africa a home for all Africans, but it is there is a pressure, for me, I will not do this. So it is from the failure of the leadership, the successive governments, ensuring that we live in abject poverty despite all the resources. We have land, agricultural land, minerals, we have oil in Africa, we have good weather in Africa. So there is no reason as to why we should be transported for labor across the continent.
When you could just be home.
We have everything it takes, but like I said, the government looks at things from a different perspective. The youth are on the street. Is it because they don't have jobs? These people are idling. So let me get them jobs elsewhere. So you're running away from responsibility. And once the social, moral fabric of a society degenerates, it touches your legitimacy as a head of state.
And I'd like to speak about legitimacy of governments and leadership, challenging the old guard of leaders and calls for a more vibrant and younger leadership in African governments. Etienne, regarding Agenda 2063, which is something Asha has also brought up, specifically around Aspiration 3, of realizing economic rights and for human rights as well, how realistic is it to achieve these goals with such a distant timeline? Should we be demanding these changes now instead of waiting? Because a lot of these things really are practicalities of just change.
Of course, we shall. And the greatest part of leader generations in Africa since independences period think that youth equals to an ability of taking great decisions. The proof is that, for example, in most of Africa's French-speaking countries, the constitutions express that the minimum age to apply for a presidential candidacy is 45 years old. I deeply think that only a younger generation in charge of leading country will value youth and include youth generation in decisional square. And I think we should still express ourselves with protest. That is one of the key we have till now. Protestations, manifestations, demonstrations. That's these are the keys we have right now, and I really think we shall use them until we have deeply reforms and until a younger generation arrives to power.
I'd like to actually just speak on these challenges, and also as we speak about these ambitions for our governments in these collective exercises around reforms and change. The International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights recognizes the right to an adequate standard of living, including housing, food and clothing, which are some of the challenges that we've been speaking to, which are not being addressed as immediate needs. Asha, do you agree that youth protests are a valid way to hold governments accountable failing to fulfill this right? Do governments still understand their basic duty to serve people, and why protests are sometimes the only way to communicate an issue?
So governments don't, in my opinion, do not understand, especially, let me be specific to our continent in Africa, our motherland. We seem to have a problem with governments not knowing what is their social contract, what is their mandate as a government. When people vote you in, whether you came in legally or illegally, are you sitting in the helm of that country to lead the narrative? So what happens with protests is a culmination. Like I said, when all other aspects degenerate, that means the parliament is not working. So there's lack of public participation. You cannot petition the parliament. The parliament in most African countries is a rubber stamp of the regime. Mm-hmm. So a government comes into power.
Especially where there's an absolute majority.
Yes, they take over and decide the government and the arm, which is the parliament, the legislature, are one and the same. The judiciary, on the other hand, is, because it's funded in most regimes by the same executive, develops cold feet. So when citizens do not find redress, because ideally, by the doctrine of separation of power, these entities should work independently so that they do an oversight over each other. But protests occur because all other channels are not being addressed. The entities have decided to down their tools. And what happens when we cannot go to parliament? Let's say a bill has been introduced, we find it not fit, or we want to give our comments, and the parliamentarians decide we will not listen. As long as instructions came. Most of them hardly read in Africa. We are also facing the issue of corruption because the regime is all about amassing wealth for themselves at the detriment of the common citizen in their respective countries. So once that happens, the last resort is the street. And that is why you see so many protests. Because like, for example, in Kenya, the protest started with a finance bill. But the finance bill was a culmination. There was public participation, the petitioning to parliament. They all blocked their ears. Public participation was shammily done. People petitioned. There was a lot of outcry. Please note that it was not the first time. We did the protest several days. But it only took the government to actually admit and withdraw, although return it later via the back door, at the tail end when parliament was attacked. So the first days of the protest, they never spoke. They released police officers, arrest people, tear gas, chaos. Yet, the saddest part was these are young Kenyans, educated, who were just carrying the flag as a symbol of patriotism, and a mask. Because they knew you'll throw tear gas. But the first day, the second, nothing happens. Until it was taken to their doorstep at parliament, then they realized, no, this is serious now, and we are going to release the military on the streets. So, as I said, African governments are more reactionary. They do not sit and abate a problem because as a continent, leadership warrants they sit down and listen to the citizens, then have a conversation on the issues affecting. But they cannot do that because they're busy looting the country. Most African heads of state want to stay forever. They do not want to leave power, even when age does not allow them, simply because you want to amass at the expense of citizens. And so a level reaches where citizens say enough is enough. And what happens when parliament fails? When any successive parliament in any country within Africa fails, it means you return power back to the people. Therefore, the people take over the power and go to the street and do that they feel is their right. And like I said, once the social contract in any government is breached, then legitimacy is an issue. And once legitimacy is gone, you can be the president, but you have no legitimacy from your people. So we've seen that in 2019 with Sudan. 30-year rule came to an end. We've seen Senegal when they tried to postpone the elections. We've seen Togo now, the constitutional issues. So this is a result of governments in Africa deciding, instead of us collaborating to build Africa, we are more of now reactionary governments, and we are now staging to manage a situation and say, oh, they're idlers, they've been sent, this, trying to look for excuses. But the youth in Africa is not fighting the regime. We are simply saying we have enough space as Africans, and Africa is our business, to actually run this continent to another level. It is just as simple as that, but they see the youth as a threat and not as people who can elevate the African continent to a continent that does not require any support from elsewhere.
Gosh, very, very, very strong words there, and very true and testimony to what we're facing at the moment as a generation of youth. As the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom, the essence in our very name is that we advocate for freedom. The respect of liberal democratic values, which in turn promote rule of law, and it is and which is a necessary guarantee to protect human rights. In closing, I would like to know what your call to action would be for young people in your country and on the continent. Etienne, I'd like to start with you, please.
Thank you. Since the repression I faced and human rights violations that I faced, I began working with Amnesty International Togo, and our work is about sensitizing people, especially students, about the importance of expressing themselves through demonstrations. Though the repression we are facing daily, we sensitize them about still expressing themselves, still expressing their point of views, not being silent. And we are expecting that our work of education with Amnesty International, that I'm greeting, because the work that is done not only by Amnesty International, but also by human rights organizations, it's simply exceptional. We've been supported by them after the repression we faced. And since then, I thought that was important, not only for me as a citizen, but also for me as a lawyer to take part to the job they are doing, building them, doing assistance with them, doing assistance giving assistance, legal assistance to those in need. And that is the beginning of the work we are doing, not only with Amnesty International Togo, but also with an organization that is called Collectif des Associations contre la Torture in Togo here.
Thank you for that, Etienne. Definitely civic education is the way to empower the citizenry. Asha, your turn, please.
Mine is the call of action starts, for me, I look at it as a multiface to our current governments and regimes in place currently. I just want to reiterate to the youth of Africa that the future is not inherited, as our leaders think. Future is created. So the future of the African continent squarely lies on our shoulder, and generations to come, we will always gauge us on what we did at the time. Did we sit when evil was erupting? Did we allow status quo to remain? So it's a clarion call to all of us to know in the little way we can, are we advocating for a good Africa where rule of law is respected, good governance is in place, and that we are able as a continent to move forward beyond where we are because we have everything. Lastly, I would also want to remind us that rights are actually defended and claimed. But it goes generations to generations to make sure those rights are not interfered with. So it is a generational thing. The generation before fought for our independence and ensured the spaces we are getting of self-actualization and self-rule took place. Our generation more now is more confined to two things, not only democracy, but the economic liberation of Africa. And that can only come from a collective core, regardless of the country we are in, whether Kenya, Botswana, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, whichever country, the youth, the time is now. We are not inheriting a generation, we are actually the future, and therefore futures are not inherited. We have to create a future that goes beyond the generations we will serve. Africa is our business, and therefore let's all work together to ensure in our little ways, whether a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, whoever, you have a role to play, because we cannot build Africa as an individual. Thank you.
Thank you, Asha. Your closing thoughts, please, David.
Africa is now, the future is now. And I would like also to launch a call for all African citizens, especially the youth, that we should also be at the front line fighting for our own rights. And secondly, allow me to say that as we're facing some challenges with the closure of civic space, we need also to take advantage of the social and digital platforms just to make sure that what's happening on our own countries, we need also to spread and share with the world. And as Portuguese speaking speaker from Mozambique, as you know that, I would like also to address my fellows from Mozambique, Portugal, Mozambique, Angola, Cape Verde, São Tomé, Guinea-Bissau, that we need also to still fighting for our own rights, but on other hands, we need to start learning English, because we know that one of the challenges that we're facing, it's about language barrier. So just to share with our fellows from different African countries, we need also to have like a similar language. For now, it's English. By the end of the day, we need also to press the government, even the African Union, to have the Swahili as African language for all the 54 African countries. And lastly, I would like to launch a call for all the young people that don't allow any elders to talk on your behalf. You need to stay at the front line to defend your own rights and to make sure that at the end of the day, what we're doing now, sometimes it's not for you. It won't benefit you. but you need also to think about the upcoming generation. You need also to think about those people who now are speechless, those people who now they are not aware about their own rights, including the PWD, people with disability. And we know that we're in August, it's the youth month, but we need to still fighting for our own rights.
Etienne, David, and Asha, thank you very much for your inputs on this day. I think the conversation definitely continues. It is not one that can be stifled. It is one that can be silenced. And I would like to laud and applaud the three of you for what you stand for and what you represent in your own countries respectively, for the work that you're doing and that you will continue to do. Kjell Magne Bondevik, the former Prime Minister of Norway and the founder of the Oslo Center, has been quoted as saying, "Dialogue is not being naive. Dialogue is about listening and learning from each other." As we think about intergenerational learning, it is about identifying common values and strengthening the youth's participation in political systems and parties. We are lacking that meaningful youth engagement, an engagement that goes beyond inviting young people to forums and inviting them to speak. They need an engagement that enforces that collaboration and partnership to the execution of different projects, agendas, an engagement that is more meaningful and that says, we see you, we do see you, we see your project, and we support you with resources. It is clear from our conversation today that protests and demonstrations are definitely the new articulation of engagement for democratic reforms. Youth definitely recognize the potential and growth and prosperity of their home countries and make revived calls for accountable leadership. And active citizenry can never be underestimated, and it is necessary for the renewal and revival of liberal democratic values and upholding and protecting human rights to shape the evolving discourse that is needed from society for shared prosperity and truly knowing that it is attainable and it is just. My right, your right, our right. Humanity will and continues always to be for us all. And remembering that our generation is not inherited, it is created. This has been the second episode of Season 1 of Let's Talk Human Rights, the Vodcast, the FNF Africa platform exploring various human rights issues. If you're interested in our activities, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and X. Simply check for FNF Africa. See you again in our season finale episode of this installment. Till then, goodbye.